It is September 4th, 1862, and Robert E. Lee has decided to invade the Union in an attack on the state of Maryland. This campaign would last only 16 days between September 4th and September 20th, 1862. As he passed Frederick County, Maryland, Lee gave the infamous Special Order 191. Lee split his forces in two by sending Stonewall Jackson with around half of the total Confederate army to take Harper's Ferry. Unfortunately for Lee, this order would be intercepted by Union forces, who became completely aware of the now split Confederate forces. After winning the Battle of Harper's Ferry, Stonewall Jackson then reunited his forces with the rest of the Confederate army. Lee and Jackson would meet Union forces at the Battle of South Mountain in Sharpsburg, Maryland. The battle took place in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the Confederates would be attacked by the Union Army led by George B. McClellan. The Confederates would win a Pyrrhic victory at South Mountain as they retreated deeper into Maryland. But McClellan and the Union Army would then chase down Lee as he marched deeper into Maryland. This would lead directly to the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam was a desperate last stand made by the Confederate Army. Lee had lost the element of surprise and was now deep in enemy territory, attempting to make an escape back into Virginia. The United States Union Army under George B. McClellan outnumbered Lee and the Confederates more than 2-1. The Union had around 90,000 men, and the Confederates had around 40,000 men. What had begun as a campaign to fight a decisive victory against the Union had quickly turned into a retreat and a fight for survival. The Confederates were able to win a Pyrrhic victory by creating a 3-mile-long defensive line west of the Antietam Creek near Sharpsburg, Maryland. Lee and his generals created killing lanes in the form of multiple artillery batteries that were spread across the 3-mile front. The Battle of Antietam is infamously called Artillery Hell for this exact reason. To man these guns, there were over 6,000 Union and 4,000 Confederate artillerymen who served in the battle. The battle also included 114 artillery batteries with the use of over 500 individual artillery pieces. The Confederates were able to use artillery to their advantage, which allowed them to escape complete destruction. The Union had already won the short-lived invasion of Maryland, but they now needed their own decisive victory. Ironically, Lee had wanted a decisive victory in Maryland, but had subsequently placed the Union Army in a position to defeat him. The Union Army had tracked Lee and his army the entire time they were in Maryland. McClellan had quickly mobilized his army and finally had a chance to crush the Confederates once and for all. It is important to note that Lee and the Confederates could have easily gambled on an offensive assault at Antietam. They could have also simply attempted to continue to retreat without making a defensive posture against the oncoming Union Army. McClellan ultimately missed his chance to destroy the Confederate Army. In my opinion, this was not due to incompetence, but rather the effectiveness of the Confederate defensive stand. We shall now turn our attention to the role of artillery in the Battle of Antietam. The Confederate Army would not have been able to survive the battle if it were not for their artillery. The Confederates deployed over 200 pieces of artillery. This artillery was placed in 3 different key points on the battlefield. The first position was the Nicodemus Heights, west of the cornfield, across Antietam Creek at Nicodemus Heights. Jeb Stuart's horse artillery, under the command of John Pelham, was an integral part of this position. The position was also occupied by Carpenter's Virginia Battery, Woodling's Virginia Battery, and Balthus's Virginia Battery. This position held their own against the brunt of Union General Burnside's assault on the Confederate left flank. The second major Confederate artillery position was at Dunker Church. This was the center of the Confederate position. This position was on the Confederate center and was commanded by Stephen D. Lee, who was under Longstreet. There was a total of 16 guns under Lee, which included the Louisiana Washington Artillery. This position also included the 12 guns commanded by John Brockenbrough. The third major position was on the Confederate right flank, located at Sunken Road, or Bloody Lane, as it is called. This Confederate right-hand flank was commanded by D.H. Hill. There were 3 guns from the Alabama Battery commanded by Robert Hardaway and 5 guns from Thomas Carter's Virginia Artillery. There were also 3 guns from James Moody's battery. Most of the Confederate artillery batteries at Antietam came from the states of Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Alabama. It cannot be understated how important it is that the Confederate officers and engineers were smart enough to create these artillery positions. The Confederate line would not have held against the Union if it were not for these artillery positions. These positions were chosen for the high ground that they were on and the lines of fire that they provided. In conclusion, the invasion of Maryland by Lee and his Confederate army was a failure. The only success that the Confederates had in the campaign was at Harper's Ferry. Although Harper's Ferry was a great victory for Stonewall Jackson, it did not stop the Union from chasing the Confederates out of Maryland. The campaign was a failure in the sense that Lee did not complete his goal of winning a decisive victory against the Union Army. In my opinion, it was a foolish move in the part of Lee to invade the North to begin with. Longstreet had advised Lee to take a defensive position in Virginia like they had done before. Lee was dissuaded from doing this by General Jackson himself. The real irony of the mistake is that Lee was a Virginian, but he was not able to learn from another fellow Virginian, George Washington. The situation that the Confederates faced in September of 1862 was like the situation the Continental Army faced in the early years of the war. Instead of fighting a defensive guerrilla-style war against the Union, Lee decided on an invasion instead. As we can see, this was a major mistake. It is strange that after the Maryland campaign, McClellan was replaced, but Lee was not. McClellan was replaced by General Meade, following Lee's invasion of Maryland, which was a Union success. Lee should have been replaced by either Jackson or Longstreet. Although Lee had successfully defended Richmond, his campaign in Maryland was a complete failure. This would have stopped another failed invasion of the North. The second failed invasion of the North culminated in the Battle of Gettysburg, which was a great defeat for the Confederacy. It is also rarely mentioned by historians that Lee should have been replaced after the failed Maryland campaign. Perhaps it is his relationship with Confederate President Jefferson Davis that stopped Lee from being replaced by a more competent general. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to my channel. Many of you who watch my channel are not subscribed. This channel is dedicated to the early history of America. This includes the history of North American Indians, European colonists, and the rise of the early nation of the United States. I will continue to produce content that also revolves around early modern military history. I have previously done videos on the Trans-Mississippi Theater of the Civil War, the U.S. Barbary Pirate War, and the French Natchez War of 1729. Check these videos out if you are interested in any of these topics. In future videos, I will also cover things such as the French Louisiana and Spanish Florida. I encourage you to also leave a comment on this video if you would like to give any video topic recommendations. I am open to different topics involving U.S. military and colonial history. Thanks for staying to the end, and we'll see you next time on another animated source book video.